But accumulations I gather through listening to the teachings may attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, the highest assembly. But accumulations I collect by listening to the teachings may attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. So I started with being mute. So I apologize, everyone. I believe that now I'm not mute. I saw that we had 12 people when I started mute, and now we dropped to 8. So I hope that I did not deter people. Anyway, well, we're 9 again. So this is module number 9. Studying Shantideva's, sorry, number 9 or 8? 7. Number 7. 7. 7 is a good number. So module number 7, studying Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life. And I think that probably we now have 4 weeks to spend together, and we'll probably require a few more weeks to complete chapter number 8, which is a massive chapter. So what I wanted to do today is to just, since we had, did we have a couple of weeks break or more than 2 weeks? 2 weeks. We had 2 weeks break, but in between we had lots of stuff happening. So we had Easter course, we had DB with Shukila. I was doing a couple of translation online for other teachers. So I felt that kind of my mind was has completely drifted away from this material. I mean, in terms of being able to pick up from where we left off previously. So we're looking at chapter number 8 that teaches the perfection of absorption. Now, in order to cultivate absorption, first of all, Shantideva says that you need to find the right situation where you will isolate yourself from the hustle and bustle of the world, which means that you need to find, in short, a quiet, conducive place for cultivating a single point meditation. If you are aspiring to develop calm abiding, to attain it actually, you need prerequisites. If you just want to develop your concentration, and your goal for the time being is not calm abiding, it might be that in your current setup, if you do daily meditation, you spend half an hour, an hour, sometimes 2 hours, you'll be able to develop your concentration better. But unless actually, if you want to attain calm abiding, unless you create an environment which is conducive for calm abiding meditation, it is likely that it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, right? So I think that saying that impossible is too probably pervasive. Maybe there are some progenies that can do it, but I can't, right? So Shantideva says, if that's your goal, first of all, rid yourself of the hustle of bustle of the world. Then he says, rid yourself of erroneous conceptions, because you might go into retreat and you have favorable retreat conditions for cultivating calm abiding, but if your mind is still busy with attachment, objects of attachment, if it's still pretty trashy, it's likely that you're not going to be able to do it. So we started in the previous module the section that explains how to rid yourself, abandoning erroneous conceptions. So in cultivating weariness of desire, we cover the first point, which is reflecting on how the effect of honing one's desire involves fear. And their actual fear was explained in verse 39 that says, if you continue to follow your desire, you will encounter a lot of misfortune. And you will encounter the fear of misfortune in being killed, cut, and so forth, which means if you think of desire in the process that fuels samsara, within the 12 links of dependent arising, in which you take one birth after the next due to the power of attachment, karma, and afflictions, you'll find yourself going from high to low, in miserable state of existence, experiencing different forms of suffering in miserable states of existence, but also in living as a human being. And those problems and difficulties are because of desire. So then he says, in order to reduce the desirous mind, you begin with reflecting on the unclean nature of the body and so forth. So as Geshe said previously, there are many things that we are attached to: food, clothing, social interactions, and so forth. But of the different things that pose a great hindrance for cultivating a single point in concentration of calm abiding, it is sexual desire. So you can say in general it is sexual desire, or you can say you desire intimacy, right? So when we become intimate with another person, it's not necessarily that the only thing on our mind is sex. No, we also kind of, in our relationship, we also bond with another person. We feel compatible with that person. We feel that our happiness is intertwined with the well-being of that person. So, it's not that kind of our relationship, the desire that we have in a relationship is only based on sex, but that's part of it, or a major part of it. So here Shantideva addresses in this section mainly that. He speaks about actually the sexual desire that we have, or in general, the desire for intimacy, just in terms of holding hands, hugging, and so forth, sleeping like 2 teaspoons. That's very cute. He says that he addresses that, and as Geshe says, you also need to think of the context that Shantideva taught. He taught it to a group of monks. He spoke as a man to a group of other men that happened to be monks. So of course, this is the thing that set up this presentation. But as the last question that was presented in the chat box today, and Geshe didn't get to answer that. He said that the question was, what about lay people then, or householders? How do you apply the same thing to a householder? Well, as householder or lay people, of course, you can commit to celibacy, but most people don't, of course. So I think that you can still fit Shantideva's explanation about how to see the faults in the object of desire, sexual desire, lust, and so forth, to whoever you're attached to physically, if that poses an hindrance for developing single-pointed concentration. So again, here we're speaking about developing shamatha practice, where one of the main hindrances is erroneous conceptions, and amongst them, we're quite busy with sex. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. So I'll just repeat it for the people at home. So Venerable Chuki is saying that, no, when he said that most lay people do not commit to celibacy, still there are periods in which they do. Like, for example, some people, when they go into a retreat for a few weeks, I could say, or a few months, or even those that do 3 years retreat, they do commit to being celibate for this period of the retreat. I mean, of course, this is according to the retreat setup or one's own personal goal, or both of them. So those hindrances can still be a part of your spiritual struggle when you go into a retreat as a layperson. On top of that, when you take upon yourself the refuge vow for layperson, the vow of approaching virtue, you can also top it up with deciding to become celibate for the rest of your life as a layperson. So that's also possible. So so when we reflect upon the unclean nature of the body and so forth, Shantideva here is speaking about not just attachment in general. I think that he's speaking about lust or sexual desire, but also desire for intimacy, not necessarily just sex. So in order then to deal with that, Shantideva says, first of all, reflect on the disadvantages, considering what you find in cemeteries. So it says, if you think about how you want to keep close contact with another person, right? So you really desire them, you want to hold them, to embrace them, and so forth. Think about actually what happens to the body when that person dies. What happens to the body when it is buried? What happens to the body if it is thrown in a chalni ground where bodies are lay are lying in an open space, either decomposing or being eaten by vultures, animals, maggots, and so forth. So if you desire somebody else's body, do you also have a desire for the body once the person is dead? Given that the makeup of the body is quite similar. Of course, the body starts rotting away, but still in terms of the skeleton, internal organs, and so forth, do you desire them, or do you actually even want to touch the body with this lustful or desirous mind once the person is dead? So that's what Shantideva is pointing out in the first point. So we start off with verse 48, which speaks of the silliness of being attracted to the wearing of clothes. So I just kind of had an internal chuckle today when we started this session, because I thought that one wrong conclusion, I don't know if it's wrong, but it could be quite awkward. One awkward conclusion that you can come to when you think of the silliness of being attached to the wearing of clothes is just to wear no clothes. I think that probably that will not be appreciated. But what Shantideva, yeah, that could be a misreading. Well, if we don't, maybe we need to invent them. All right, so you're attached to it even when it is covered. Why do you not desire it when it is uncovered? If you have no need for it, why do you embrace it when it is covered? So again, this verse that we began with today is speaking of what would happen if the person that you embrace would actually no longer be a person, that you would be embracing a corpse. So as we're using also the other commentary, the Nectar of Manjushri's Speech, which I feel that is more clear than the other commentary that we've been using. It says in the commentary in page 272 at the very bottom, he loved her body once when it was clothed and adorned. Why does he not want it now that it is naked and thrown in the channel ground? Logically, he ought to want and desire it. If we were to apply that, he does not desire his naked corpse because it is unclean. Why did he embrace it when it was all bedecked and covered? For the fact that the fact is that it was as unclean then as it is now. Remember that when I was living in India, I had a Tibetan flatmate that died unexpectedly one day. He hadn't got an epileptic fit. He was lying on his belly. He got suffocated on his pillow. And then at some point when we took him down to the cremation ground, his body was, the person in charge of the cremation ceremony just took a pair of scissors and kind of unceremoniously, very abruptly and quickly remove all his clothes, right? Cut all his clothes, and was lying completely naked and bare on the pile of wood. I thought about it. It's quite interesting because Tibetans are, I think, in general, they're a culture that are quite shy about. People are quite shy about the body. It's like yeah. Anyway, they're quite shy about the bodies. But then, on the cremation ground, there was no kind of shyness about it at all. It was just kind of the body, the clothes were unceremoniously taken away, and no one flinched. I mean, I flinched in a sense that I thought that it's pretty kind of interesting how when we are alive, we're completely embarrassed about the body, hide the body. When we die, actually, no one cares. Yeah. Yeah. I've never seen that actually. So Chuka is saying that, no, it seems that in some Western cultures, there's the opposite of that. When someone dies, I think that when they're lying in an open coffin, you have people that dress the corpse and that they wear makeup and so forth. Sorry. So then, yeah, that's the other end of it. So Shantideva says that here. So Shantideva says here that if you think of what's lying in a channeling ground, then if you are being attached or attracted to another person, well, what about when they are clothed, wearing clothes when they're alive, and being completely stripped naked when they are lying around with bare skin on a channeling ground? Do you still feel attracted to that? So that finishes the section in which Shantideva says you can attempt to reduce your desire when you think of what you find on channeling grounds, dead bodies and such. Then it says, sorry? Yeah. Mm. Yeah, or your parent. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. So I'm just going to repeat this question to the people at home. Um, so what about, rather than speaking of desire or attachment, what about having a connection with another person? Like, for example, if you're married to that person for a few decades, you have kids together, then they pass away, you still have some connection, you have a connection to that person. So how about that? Or, or kind of what's the relationship of that contact, or the nature of the relationship that you have with that person? So I think that, first of all, I think that from the Buddhist perspective, it's not that there is an expectation that everyone necessarily have to become monks and nuns. It's not, of course, it's not for everyone. Some people, most people have a relationship, and also in bringing up a family. You do your best, to have meaningful relationship with your family. And I think that there's no expectation that you'll be like a complete saint in your relationship, free of anger, attachment, desire, and so forth. I mean, of course, if you could, that's best, but most people can't. And I think that also, just looking at our operation as human beings, as part of, you can say, human species, procreation depends on, having kids does depend upon desire. So if you kind of, when you're in a relationship, that's part of a relationship. So the Buddha said that for householders, there is a certain ethical code that he recommended, which does not entail refraining from any intimacy whatsoever. So obviously you grow, you have a long-term relationship with another person, with your family members, children, brothers, sisters, parents, and so forth. And many of those connections can be made very meaningful. So when we often we speak about the difference between love and attachment, or genuine love, or love that is mixed up with attachment, we recognize that many of our relationships, we do have love and concern for the people in our relationship, but often they are mixed up with attachment, which means that often we like the other person. We feel connected to that person because they make us happy. because they give meaning to our life, because they give meaning to our family, and because they give meaning to whatever we do. It's not to say that this is necessarily a bad thing. Now, so rather than judging it in terms of good or bad and so forth, it's more like it's a type of concern that we have for another person, but it's still involved with what do we get out of it. So this is a thing that how most of our relationship work. And from the Buddhist perspective, we want to develop our mind, I think, and to move from mainly being concerned about our own welfare to being mainly concerned about the welfare of others, and at the end to be solely invested in thinking of the welfare of others. But we have to make that transition gradually. And to make the transition gradually, it's hard to kind of think about it just in terms of black and white, and also to put ourselves down for the bad things and to feel bad about it. It's like, we currently, if you have a family relationship and you have kids that you love dearly, it's not that you are expected to now detach yourself from your kids and to overnight change your attitude to your kids. It's impossible. It's completely unrealistic, and you have meaningful connection with them. You're, I guess, genuinely and seriously concerned about the well-being and the future and so forth. But still, kind of, the idea is to then extend that. First of all, to think that you want to wish it to them regardless of what you get yourself personally from that, but also then to be able to consider other people, not only the ones in your family unit, but also other people as close to your heart. So again, it's not going to happen overnight. It's many decades or many lifetimes practice. So then I think that in a personal relationship, like with your husband, children, and so forth, you can still have meaningful relationship with the people that are close to your heart. Things that will be based on kind of positive values, virtuous values, like the 16 guidelines and so forth. So certainly there's a lot of, I think, room for development when you use that. And at the end of your life, when you feel that even within your personal relationship with your family, within your family unit, you were meaningful for their life and they were meaningful to your life, and you were able to relate to them in a virtuous and positive ways, and you were also able to use them as things, as aids for the developing your mind. Even more so, it makes that connection very meaningful. So we don't have to override that or to get rid of that. Here it says, of the 4 Tibetan schools, the Nyingma have married lamas and many highly realized ones. And also it would appear that Buddha's teachings are relevant to all walks of life. Yeah, you can definitely practice Dharma within your family unit. And even, I think that for many of us in the West, we might have interest in Buddhism. It doesn't mean that our other family members have interest in Buddhism. So we can still, I think, find common grounds. We can speak about Buddhism to them, but meet them where they're at so that we're useful to them, but also they're useful to us. I think that often, if we are able to relate to people around us, not Buddhist people, but to other people, and find common ground with them, informed by Buddhist views, and then to listen to what they say, to react to what they do, but also to try to react in a way that is involved with the Buddhist, I guess, spirit. They benefit us. Some way might be meaningful to them, but also they become meaningful to us. Does it answer some of your? No worries. I think that your question is pretty. I think that is kind of very vast, very deep, and I think that we can draw upon so many different things in our daily life to see how we are connected to people, to other people, and we want to make that connection meaningful, so that at the end of our life we have no regrets. So, going back to the text, we spoke of the disadvantages of desire, considering what you find in cemeteries. Then today we mainly spoke about the aspects of those who are still alive. So here, again, Shantideva speaks of this point from the point of view of mainly sexual desire and a desire for intimacy. Not necessarily just sex, but also just kind of this intimate connection with another person. So it speaks about living person that are other than oneself, but he also says you can just as well think of yourself, and when you understand the nature of your own body, and we're not, the nature of our body is more revealed to us, we know the nature of our own body, then you can also think of the nature of somebody else's body as a way, as a tool for reducing that desire. So here in this section, we often speak of attachment, but I think that still in English, it works better maybe in some context to speak about lust, or to speak about sexual desire, to speak about this desire for intimacy, just to make it more contextualized. So what I did at home in preparing for that, I looked at the verses, including a couple of commentaries, and it seems that Shantideva here addresses different arguments that our mind comes up with for why it is suitable to feel a sense of desire for the other person. So we might come up with a certain argument, and then Shantideva addresses this argument. So we begin with verse 49. So verse 49 comes out of the heading. First of all, belongs to the section of attachment is sin to be unreasonable once the lack of cleanliness become apparent. So verse 49 to 51, 3 verses come under the heading of the unreasonableness of being attached to physical sensations, to seek, to lust, to chase after physical sensations. So first of all, in I thought of the argument that we can put forward to verse 49 that speaks about the saliva of another person. I think that, in short, we can say that, but I like kissing. I really like kissing. Yeah. Yeah. I really like kissing the other person. So Shantideva says, if both excrement and saliva arise solely from food, why do you dislike excrement and find joy in saliva? I mean, this is the way that that I think about it. I don't know if that's what Shantideva has in mind, but I think that probably when you think of popular culture, movies, TV series, posters, and so forth, the intimacy in kissing, Shantideva says, if you like that, that comes from the body. Why do you like that and you don't like excrement? I mean, it's quite obvious why, but anyway, so the other commentary says, what if you were to say that he took delight in the saliva of his mistress or his wife? In truth, her excrement and her saliva came from a single source, both derived from her food. Why then does the ignorant and lustful lover not enjoy her excrement, finding it disgusting, while at the same time it delights to taste her saliva as though it was honeyed nectar? Yeah, so when it says delight to taste her saliva, I guess it also refers to kissing. So that's the argument in verse 49, but I like kissing. Then in verse 50, I think that the argument is saying that, no, I would say that I really like, I feel connected to the person. I feel I'm lust after the person, I have sexual desire because their skin is so soft to touch. It is so delightful. It's so pleasant to touch that skin. So Shantideva says, actually, there are other things that are pleasant and you don't develop lust after those things. Like, for example, cotton. So cotton too is soft to the touch, but while you find no delight in a pillow, like a soft pillow, you think it does not smell. Now, when you say you think it does not smell, that refers to the body of the other person. Sorry? Yeah, the scent of the body. You think it does not smell. So Shantideva says, lustful one, you're confused as to what is unclean. So the other commentary says, perhaps it says that it is the softness of her touch that pleases him. Softness of touch, however, is also supplied by cotton wool, yet the lover has no desire for it and takes no delight in pleasant pillows, telling himself that cotton wool derives from something unclean. I mean, this is pretty kind of, I thought about it as a kind of, this sentence is a bit awkward. Does cotton wool derive from something that is unclean? I guess that it's not as unclean as the body, but when you think of, whether you wash the cotton or not, or whether you think of just kind of in general something kind of cotton that is grown outside and can be dirty by soil and dust or whatever. Anyway, so the person thinks that cotton might be unclean, but then Shantideva says, but the lustful lover is all mixed up. He fails to recognize the uncleanliness of his mistress' body for what it is and claims it does not emit an evil stench. I mean, we know our bodies, we know that kind of sometimes, and also the bodies of others, we have sometimes disturbing BOs. Anyway, then verse 51 says, thinking, I cannot copulate with this cotton, although it is soft to the touch. Confused, negative, and lustful people become angry towards it. So, no, the person says that. So in verse 50, that person says, but I like the person, like the body of that person because it is so soft to touch, it's so pleasant to touch. Shantideva says cotton actually is pleasant and soft to touch, just as well. So we answer to that in saying that, yeah, but cotton is dirty and the body of the other person is not dirty. And Shantideva says, actually, you got it the other way around, because when you think of the things that come out of the body, evil stench and so forth, the body is by nature unclean. It continues in verse 51, where we again pose a certain argument. So, and the argument is, but no, really, I can't have sex with a pillow. I can't copulate with a pillow. So thinking I cannot copulate with this cotton, although it is so soft to the touch, confused, negative, and lustful people become angry towards it. I think that the last line, become angry towards it, is in thinking that cotton, pillow, what have you, it can be soft and pleasant to touch, but we have sometimes no problem with destroying it, with chucking it out, with ruining it, and so forth. We'd have pillow fights in the monastery. Maybe should ask Geshe-la. Maybe we should also have pillow fights here. Yeah. It's wrong thinking. Yeah. Well, I think that becoming angry towards it, the way, it's very kind of, it's unclear in both commentaries what it means. Let's look at actually this commentary and see what it says. In their desire, lustful people are confused, thinking only of their lovers who are unclean by very nature. They grossly find fault with cotton pillows, although they are soft and smooth, just because they cannot copulate with them. I don't know, this argument doesn't kind of, yeah, well, no, well, I think that probably, yeah, I don't understand this argument. The way that I would try to explain this verse is that we find fault sometimes with pillow. I like this pillow, I don't like this pillow. You use a pillow for a certain duration, it was soft and nice. At some point, it's not satisfactory anymore. So you have no problem with kind of chucking it out to the garbage or cutting it and using it for something else. Maybe that's a way that I would explain this verse, because the other ones are not kind of too clear to me. Yeah. Yeah, there's a discussion here about whether you're getting angry at a pillow or whether you're kind of just turning it over when one side is hot, the other one is cold. Anyway, I think that the point in the verse is clear, or in those verses. So Shantideva was, I think it was around the 7th or 8th century. 8th century. Yeah. Sorry? One did have hot showers, yeah. Anyway. Yeah, it's more like kind of this discussion can give rise to so many different. Well, I think that I think that if you don't think only of pillars, I think that if you think of other things that are soft to touch, pleasant to touch, there are other things that are pleasant to touch just as well, but we get angry with them. I mean, think about it, let alone. Yeah. Yeah, you don't get attached to pillows, to feathers, and so forth. That might be the meaning of this verse. Anyway, I think that even if this line is not very clear, I think that's when you look at verses 49 to 51, in thinking of how we have desire and wanting to come in contact with another person's body because it is soft to touch and so forth. Shantideva is saying that actually the nature of the body of the other person is unclean. When you think of other things that come out of the body, when you think of smells and so forth, we are confused about unclean bodies. So then we continue, with verse 52. So let's just look at the commentary. The outline. The outline says, there are two verses, arresting the conception of things as clean. So Shantideva says, what you desire is something that is impure by nature. And it seems that we immediately start to resist that. So the argument that is presented in verse 52 says that, but wait a minute, it's not that I really like filth. It's not that I desire, it's not that I lust for filth. So previously, Shantideva says, when you lust for another person, when you want to copulate with another person, you're copulating with something that is impure by nature. So the response to that in verse 52 is like, no, actually, I don't desire something that is filthy. So Shantideva says, well, in replying to this argument that I don't desire something that is filthy, if you have no attachment to the unclean, then why do you copulate with another, which is a cage of bone tied together with muscles, plastered over with a mud of flesh? So in the other commentary, it says, for if they deny that they are attached to filth, how can they cuddle on their laps in a human body no more than a cage of bones tied fast with sinews and plastered over with a mud of flesh? That's pretty clear. Then the mind continues in finding arguments why I do like the body of another person. So the next argument thing is like, I don't really like cotton, but I like the body of another person. Right. So if we think of this argument, I don't really like cotton, but I like the body of another person. Verse 53 says, you yourself have many unclean things that you constantly have to utilize. Out of obsession for the unclean, also other bags of filth, why do you desire it? So the commentary to this verse says, a lover's own body is in itself full of filth. It contains the 36 unclean substances such as spittle, mucus, excrement, and urine, and he or she wallows in it constantly. In addition to it, the lover still craves for another sack of filth, the filth of a partner's body, which also has the nature of 36 impurities. Why on earth it is so desirable? It does not make sense. So actually, kind of this argument that I put forward, I don't like cotton, but I like their body. Actually, that belongs to the next verse, 54. So sorry, I made a mistake. That belongs to the next verse. But anyway, what I wanted to do with respect to verse 53 is just to, since this section mentions the 36 impure substances, I tried to look for it at all. In the end, I just kind of resorted to Googling 36 impure substances. So I did find it. Let's put it on the screen. So the 36 impure substances. So hair and facial hair. There you go, all the hipsters of the world. Facial hair is also an impure substance. So teeth, nails, excrement, urine, sweat, mucus, tears, saliva, secretions on the skin from the ears and eyes, skin, flesh, blood, bones, fat, marrow, veins, sinews, lungs, heart, liver, spleen, kidneys, stomach, small intestines, large intestines, the colon, urinary bladder, grease, lymph, pus, phlegm, bile, brain, and cerebral membranes. Doesn't sell the bowel. I think, would you say that small, large, and colon are included within that? Yeah. Anyway. So there you go, 36 impure substances. So then the next verse, number 54, says, I actually like their, sorry, let's look at the outline for a second. 54 and 55. 54 and 55 come under the heading of individually. The body and mind are nothing to be attached to. So someone might say that, actually, I really like that person because they have a nice body, but also they're a really nice person, they're a kind person. If you connected to that person, we have so many things in common. We share the same values. So kind of we're speaking about liking somebody else's body, but also liking their characteristics, their habits, and so forth. We know I'm in sync with that person. So I really like their mind. So first of all, the first argument in verse 54 is that I like the body of that person. I don't like a cotton ball, but I like the body of that person. So it says in verse 54, let's look at that first of all. I delight in this flesh, right, or the body of that person. If this is what you wish to touch and behold, why do you not desire flesh in its natural state, devoid of mind? Again, I think that it plays around the same point. If you like the body of another person when they're alive, why do you not like the body of another person when they're dead? I mean, particularly in terms of wanting to touch, behold, caress, copulate, or whatever, what have you. We like that when the person is alive, not so much when the person is no longer alive. Okay. So the other commentary says, lovers could argue that they have no attraction for cotton wool. It is the skin and flesh of their partners that they love to touch and look at. But if this is so, Shantideva replies, why do they not delight to touch the flesh of their partners' corpses while devoid of mind? They're abandoned in the challenge ground in their natural condition. Then we would say that actually it's not just sexual desire. I also like that person for what they are. They're really kind, they're gentle, they're loving, and so forth, which you can say are characteristics of the mind. So I really like the mind of that person. That's such a spiritual being. I like the mind of that person. So Shantideva says, actually, when you think of your sexual desire and wanting to touch that person, the mind of that person cannot be touched. So any mind you may desire cannot be touched or beheld, and whatever you are able to touch will not be consciousness. What is the use of embracing the meaningless? In some sense, it seems that here in verses 54 and 55, Shantideva is tending towards analyzing the person that you're touched with from the viewpoint of the ultimate, trying to look at to find what is actually you desire. Do you, when you lust after another person, are you going after the body? Are you going after the mind? If you think of the body, can you find anything that is pleasant within the body, that is pleasing within the body when you think of the internal makeup? When you think of what happens to the body if it has no consciousness? Or are you attracted to the consciousness of that person, in which case it cannot be touched or it cannot be beheld? So perhaps, sorry, that was excitement. Perhaps the lovers will object that they do not want them anymore because of the partner's minds have departed. Indeed, it is rather in their minds that they delight, to which Shantideva retorts that the lovers are physically unable to touch or see the minds that they desire. Conversely, the partner's bodies, which they can touch and see, are not at all the minds they claim to want. Why, therefore, do lovers indulge in copulation, looking at and touching bodies that have nothing to do with the minds that they supposedly want? It only means that the lovers are completely confused. Again, kind of to that, I would add that Shantideva here is speaking about overcoming obstacles for the development of single point in concentration. So if currently in your life, you have a relationship, you have married, or if you're not married, you have still relationship with others. It doesn't mean to say that you should henceforth stop all your relationship and become celibate. If you're aiming at developing a single point concentration of shamatha, this is an area that you need to deal with, sexual attraction, and these antidotes are dealing for sexual attraction or for lust. If this is not currently your priority, it might be that, it's still good to reduce attachment, desire, and so forth, because it's still something that plays a lot on our mind, and so long as that happens, so for that long, our mind will remain unclear, and there will still be difficulties and suffering. But it doesn't mean to say that you definitely need now to abstain from everything, because it's not it's likely not to happen. It's impossible. So then, reflecting on those faults in relation to yourself, as we said, our bodies are definitely known to us, and we know the unclean nature of our own body. It is not strange that you do not realize the bodies of others to be of an unclean nature. But it is indeed strange that you do not realize you yourself to be just unclean. Very poignant. So then Shantideva says in verse 57, that comes out of the heading, physical appearance is nothing to be attached to. So again, if you think of an argument that you would come up in relation to that, you said, but I lust after that person, I desire that person, I'm attached to that person because they have a great figure, they're hot. So Shantideva says, having forsaken the young lotus flower unfolded by beams of sunlight fresh from cloud, why would a mind adhering to the unclean do you take joy in a cage of filth? So the first commentary that we looked at during class was not that clear to me. The other commentary is better. It says, at least it works better for me. Lovers might proclaim that they are in love with the beauty of their partner's skin, right? So it's all an ideal of beauty. But in this case, why do they overlook the color and loveliness of the fresh young lotus blossoms opened in the sunshine of a cloudless sky, and instead allow themselves to be entranced by a bag of dirt, the mind engrossed by masses of filth? This is surely illogical. So if someone might say that I desire the body of another person, I really like them because it's so beautiful, they have such a beautiful form. Shantideva says, actually, there are other things that have beautiful forms. Lotus flower. which grows out of mud, but it is completely beautiful and pristine and clean. So in some sense, it says that rather than being attached to the flower because it's beautiful, you're attached to the mud, or you're attached to something that is to a bag of filth that is plastered with skin, right? So you just attached to the skin, but you're not thinking of what's happening beneath the skin. Whereas I think that probably you could say that a lotus flower is not something that is by nature unclean. It's actually quite nice and pristine. So why not be attached to a beautiful lotus flower? Why are you attached to a body that actually is a nature of uncleanliness? So that's the point in verse 57. So then it goes even more sharp than that. And someone said that actually kind of, if we bring it down to I guess more a baseline. Someone said that actually these are the body of another person because I have sex with that person and I really like the sex organs. So it becomes something that kind of, I guess that in everyday language it sounds it sounds a little bit crude, but Shantideva finds way to speak about it in a more pleasant way. So it says, looking at the outline, by ascertaining the characteristic of the sexual organs, attachment is seen to be unreasonable. So reflecting on their lack of cleanliness in light of the fact that they are the point at which unpleasant or unclean things exit the body. So if you say that actually my sexual desire is based on attraction to their sex organs, Shantideva says, look at what comes out of those sex organs. Verse 58. Since you do not desire to touch a place that is sullied by filth, then why do you desire to touch the body from which that arose? I mean, it's quite interesting because I think that the verses are pretty clear, coherent. They make sense, but I think that we still have sexual desire. I mean, it's still kind of, we're still blinded by it. So we have to kind of remind ourselves of that again and again. As Geshe said, kind of you glance over those verses and think that, yeah, I get it. It's quite easy, it's quite simple, but we need to think about it again and again. But also to imagine, to let our imagination take over. Imagine a situation where, how it would feel like to touch that filth, how it would feel like to embrace a sack of flesh and bones and sinews and so forth. Would you find it pleasant or unpleasant? Mm. 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 Yeah, so it seems like kind of, so Michelle is saying that if you think about it too much, it might create a certain imbalance where kind of you might start hating yourself, self-loathing, or have a sense of loath to others. So it seems that it's going to such an extreme that you would get an opposite response. So here, Shantideva, I think that there are a couple of points that I can say in relation to that. First of all, it's the one that Geshe made in the morning session, where it's not that you only think about that, you also think about a precious human body with freedoms and opportunities that has some good qualities in it. That's one thing. So, if you think about, for example, someone that has a habit of self-loathing, right? This is something that is quite common in our society, or in this day and age, where people have low self-esteem, they loathe themselves, sometimes to the point in which they feel so angry that it's self-harm. So if you reach that point, Shantideva is not Shantideva, the Buddha pointed out some things I think that can be helpful in terms of thinking of your situation from another perspective. first of all, from the perspective of having a precious human body with freedoms and opportunities. So it's not something to loathe, it's actually something to appreciate. That's one thing. The second thing is that all of us have Buddha nature, which is not based on the body, it is based on the mind. So people that have issue with kind of low self-esteem or self-worth, they think that they're not worthy, they're stupid, ignorant, and so forth. Everyone has Buddha nature, the Buddha said. So those points can bring the mind up. So that's one point to bear in mind. The other point to bear in mind here is that here again, these antidotes to attachment are taught in a specific context where you're in retreat or you're preparing for a retreat in which you're going to do a single pointed meditation. And one of the chief obstacles for that is sexual desire. So in that context, you need to address that forcefully or strongly. So it might seem that what Shantideva here is saying is kind of really over the top, but still it's in a very particular context where kind of there are waves of kind of this lust and desire that go through your mind when you're trying to develop single point concentration. And the thing is that often, I think that when you find that when you go into retreat, that the mind resists. It builds up this bitter resistance to stay single pointly virtuous. And our mind works, it has different mechanisms. You get bored, you think about food. You get bored, you start to think about sex. You get bored, you think about something else. Now we work in different ways, and different things start to become really exaggerated in our mind once we start to attempt to make it focus. So particularly in those situations, Shantideva is offering those, I think, kind of strong or radical ways to create a shift in our mind. So context is also important to this teaching. Also in general, I think that kind of we can use those techniques in certain situations that arise in our life, in that when we enter into a relationship with another person, part of that relationship is based on sexual desire. This is a biological imperative, but also or a biological mechanism imperative also, but also part of our mental makeup. So you can have a good couple relationship, have family and so forth, and that's good. That's okay. That's okay. But sometimes we also have strong desire that afflicts the mind to a great degree. Sometimes we have desire to people that we shouldn't have relationship with, those that are in other relationships, those that have no interest in us whatsoever, and because of that we suffer. Sometimes we are in a relationship and still we desire to be, to start relationship with others, to cheat on our partners and so forth. So when those things arise, we can also use those tools that Shantideva explains here, even if we're not doing a single point meditation at the moment, but we can still use them in order to bring down the desire. So it's also about finding a balance. If you feel that as part of your meditation, you develop self-loathing, it's an indication that actually you're not doing it right, or that there's something else that you need to add to the meditation, such as a precious human body, plus thinking of Buddha nature. No worries. So Ode is saying, it is interesting that we overcome evolutionary drives by using the evolutionary development of self-awareness to overcome suffering. Well, it's like, similarly, you can say, Oli, when you think of the explanation of Tantra, in which we use desire as a path, it is said that using desire as a path is similar to a worm that is born from an egg in a piece of wood. And as it grows, it eats the wood, it consumes the wood. That was its birthplace. So similarly, you can say that we kind of use our biological evolutionary drives in a way that at the end will also bring down our evolutionary drives. Anyway, since it's 4 o'clock of 2 past 4, so let's leave it here for today. Thank you very much, people. And let's do some dedications. Due to this virtue, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state. May the precious Supreme Bodhisattva not yet born arise. May that the reason not decline, but increase more and more. In this land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, all powerful and residence in Gyatso. Please remain till samsara ends. You uphold the Sibu's moral way who serves in the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine. Who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the 3 jewels, protector of myself and others, your disciples. Please live long. Thank you.